What's up guys, we're finally back with another Highlander Realism analysis. Today in part 2 we'll be looking at the armor options, if you could call it that, and we'll be seeing not just how practical they are, but also how they compare to possible historical outfits. Now, if you just watched the previous Highlander analysis, then you'd know that we have a certain identity issue with Highlander here. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you go watch that because I won't be going into the full breakdown here, but I will try to summarize the important parts. When we look at our Highlander in the first video, we had to establish that chronologically, he does not belong with the Vikings. If anything, he belongs with the Knights, but if we were going to use a chronological timeline, then both Centurion and Gladiator would belong with the Vikings more than the Knights. So timelines don't really work with this game. That being said, even if we were to use a timeline as a form of comparables for our Highlander here, it would still be difficult to have a cut and dry comparison like we had with the Centurion in the way that he's specifically mimicking that of a Roman Centurion / legionary. For Highlander, there is obviously a lot taken from the Scottish Highlanders in his outfit, but considering how much we talked about the Gallowglass and the Kerns in the previous video, I would like to bring that up as well when it seems applicable. Anyways, let's move on to actually looking at in-game armors. Let's start with the headgear. Usually I go through the process of breaking down each category and then picking out the best of the subcategories, but there are a lot of interesting choices here, some of which don't have their own category at all, so we're just going to pick and choose some of the interesting ones and then move on from there. Starting off, a real easy one, we have essentially the only Viking helmet for this Viking hero. Let me start by saying that leather caps were common during the Viking ages, and although we don't have any examples to corroborate this claim due to leather being organic and deteriorating over time, it is assumed that hardened leather caps could have been used as a form of head protection. That being said, in this example, there is a metal band mixed with the leather. At that point, you'd think they just finish it off with some sort of iron cap, but hey, it's at least something. Now, would a 16th century Highlander or Gallowglass or Kern wear something like this? No, not at all. All in all, it still looks cool though. Next, we're going to look at multiple different types of the same variant of headgear that I'll just transition through the screen, and it is essentially trying to be a Scottish bonnet. Now, full disclosure, I am not Scottish, never claimed to be. Scottish history is also not one of my expertises either. That being said, from what I could gather about historical Scottish bonnets, this doesn't seem to corroborate correctly. For starters, to my understanding, these bonnets are actually supposed to be a solid color compared to a plaid pattern that we have here. I will cover plaid patterns and the tartans when we get to the outfits, so let's just focus on the headgear for now. Anyways, not just are these bonnets supposed to be a solid color, but they are also supposed to be a bit more rigid as well, giving a sort of brim look to it. The floppier ones came from anachronistic English depictions from the Victorian age, or so I've read. If you for some reason know more about 16th to 18th century Scottish bonnets, I would like to hear it down below in the comments. One last thing I'll bring up, which essentially applies to all the headgears, is painted faces. Having a painted face for a Highlander like this was popularized by a movie by Mel Gibson that you've probably heard about, called Braveheart. That movie has a bit of historical inaccuracies to it, but we aren't here to talk about that. So when it comes to the concept of face painting for Scottish Highlanders, you might ask, where does it come from? There are a lot of theories. One very brief summary of one is that there was once a group of people in northern Scotland known as the Picts. They were also nicknamed the Painted Men. The first recorded encounter of them and their painted warriors was an anecdote by Julius Caesar, who never actually saw them himself in person. There were, however, depictions from the legionaries who had encountered them, and they mentioned that they used blue paint to cover their faces, similar to the movie Braveheart. I mention this because after a long time, when the Picts were no longer the Picts, they ended up integrating into Scotland as a whole. Could they have transferred some of the traditions of the past onto later generation of Scottish? It is possible. Could the Romans have mistaken early Celtic tattoos as face paint because they didn't have a concept of cultural tattooing like Celtic cultures did? That is also possible as well. The truth is, we don't know and there isn't enough substantial evidence to say. What we can say is that face paint was used by many cultures everywhere. So, is it possible that Scottish Highlanders used it? Possibly, but we don't have any reason to believe that they did, other than their ancestors may have upon years and years and years ago. I guarantee you that we don't do a majority of the things that our ancestors did 800 years ago, so it seems odd that they would. It's probably safe to say that a majority of Highlanders don't actually wear face paint into battle. To finish off, let's quickly answer the question, did Scottish Highlanders wear any form of head protection at all? Well, that's a difficult question because it's hard to find a definitive answer, especially for earlier century Highlanders. That being said, there is a quote from myarmory.com, which is a site that I trust very much, which said this about the Highlanders. In the 16th century, the Highlanders, if not equipped with a helmet, would be bareheaded, but the 17th century they adopted the blue bonnet from the lowlanders. So basically the answer is that if they had a helmet, they would wear it. If they didn't have one, they did not. Makes sense to me. If we were to look at it from the perspective of the Gallowglass though, they would have most likely worn a helmet due to their role as a heavy infantry unit. They were meant to hold the lines while the Kerns, who were the skirmishers, would flank from the sides and harass the attacking force. Unfortunately, with such a large sword but no considerable armor, our Highlander here wouldn't fit either of the heavy infantry or skirmisher roles. Now let's move on to the chest pieces. Normally we go to the arms next, but forewarning you now, there isn't much to talk about there, and it's probably going to make more sense why if we talk about the chest armor first. Before we talk about any of the actual in-game pieces though, let's talk about kilts. I said I was going to talk about the plaid, and so I am going to do that. When we talk about the style and attire for those in the Highland clans, what we have to realize is that the kilts are more than just a fashion statement. The plaid design on these kilts are basically known as the tartan. A tartan was almost a form of a clan banner that you wore. Based on the pattern and color, someone could distinguish which clan you came from. So for all you role-playing Scotland Forever 4-man Highlander squads out there, make sure you match both the armor and the color patterns with your team if you want to make a clan. Speaking of the kilts more specifically though, they were originally in a form that we would consider as a great kilt. In today's day and age, when I would say kilt, the average layman might think that it's just some sort of plaid pleated skirt. The truth is that it was originally much more than that. It was almost like a blanket that you could entirely wrap around your body. If it were cold or you were in inclement weather, you could use it to cover your entire body with this, and then when you wanted to wear it down, you could just wrap it around your waist or wear it like a sash. The type of clothing is directly correlated to the weather that it would be like in northern Scotland, and the culture reflected it. So I think that's just kind of neat. With that out of the way, let's look at some of the most comparable outfits we have in game. Let me say now that although there are some that I think are really close to being good, they all fall short somewhere. Like usual, since most armors are just copy-pasted themselves, I will break them down into variants that the armors are based off of, and then I'll just pick the one that I think is the best, i.e. the least amount of studs and spikes. Let me begin by saying that they all have capes, and I think that's redundant and stupid. The kilt itself functions as the cape. Capes and cloaks were meant to keep you warm and or dry from the weather. If your main source of clothing is already doing that, why wear a cape? Think of it like wearing a thick, all-weather parka or jacket and then putting a blanket on top of you and then trying to live your daily life. That would just get in the way and it'd weigh you down. It doesn't make sense. So we're just going to ignore the capes. Hopefully they'll give us the ability to remove it at some point. Starting off, we have the Alpha chest, which is going to be the pick for this variant. Before I start making complaints, let's talk about some of the good things. Right off the bat, we have a Scottish dirk on the belt. Very iconic and a great addition. We also have a little pouch that seems useful as well, and I love to see it. I talked about small useful additions like pouches in my Conquer analysis, where I mentioned that small subtle additions like these make you really believe in the idea that they are a person doing actual things. If they don't look like they have pockets, then they might need a pouch. When you look down, he isn't wearing massive boots, but he's wearing shoes with linen wraps around his calves. That seems great and plausible considering that leather was usually only used for the most important items, so people usually wore small leather shoes rather than wearing tall boots that end up using a lot more leather. I wish that there was a version without the wrap so that we could just have the exposed calves. I think that would be a lot more fitting, but I don't think this is unreasonable. Focusing on the chest piece itself, we have some form of leather armor. Now, I just said the forbidden words, leather armor, and usually this is a big no-no. I get that, but hear me out in this case. MyArmory.com, again, a source that I trust very much, said this. The only protection commonly worn by 16th century Highlanders was a tar-stiffened lane covered with deerskin. I'll make sure to link myarmory.com's link down below to this article. This could quite possibly be the case where leather armor might be permitted. That being said, it was apparently stripped off right before battle and they opted for going into battle with just a shirt or no covering at all. I'm willing to just let it slide in this case because I simply don't know enough about it, and this is the closest we've ever gotten to leather armor being a reasonable-ish thing. So, now to look at some of the bad stuff. To start, fur. Fur lined this, fur lined that, fur just strapped to the body with a belt. I don't understand why they do stuff like this, but I hate it. Sure, lining clothing with fur is something that people did, but putting it on everything and then strapping fur skin to your body is not something done. One last thing I'd like to mention is the kilt itself. It would be perfect and work great if it was done correctly. This is the perfect case of seeing something and trying to imitate it, but not understanding the reasoning behind it. So, for example, we have the plaid kilt here, and then the same plaid sash. The historical reasoning behind this is that this was a specific tartan or great kilt that was of this Highland warrior and is very large and needs to wrap around the entire body and waist. The issue for this game, though, is that the sash part does not connect with the lower kilt at all. Also, the kilt is split like a modern skirt with an opening on each side. This is not correct either. This could have been the best armor if it weren't for the fact that the kilt is so crucial that even though there are small inaccuracies, once you see them stand out, then you can never not see them. Now, even though I said that I would only mention one outfit of each variant, I just want to mention that there is one called the Gallowglass chest. I just think that's cool. Next, we're going to be looking at the Morrigan chest. This variant was hard to choose from because they're all really similar, but we are just going to focus on this one for now. A few things that are similar to the previous variant, but a lot of stuff has been removed. Still has a satchel or pouch or whatever, but no Scottish dirk. That is very unfortunate. The kilt is also only wrapped around the waist, which is something that was done, but it still has the same issues before with the openings on both sides. On the back, you can see that he's wearing the world's most useless cape with a bit of random fur scraps thrown on top of it to keep his cape warm, I guess. Overall, not one of the better choices. Next, we're going to look at the Liberty Spike chest piece. This one is interesting because this is the only one of its variants to have a padded gambeson-like chest protection. We can see that he has a dagger back, although I wouldn't particularly call it a Scottish dirk. If you look at the dagger, you can see that it has a scabbard that's just raw wood. The wood itself is either cracking a lot, and if that's the case, is probably on the brink of destruction, or they put a wood plank texture on it. I don't know how you could make a scabbard out of tiny little planks of wood, but okay. As you can see, he has a separate plaid scarf compared to his kilt. It's the same issue that we have with the first one as well. Overall, not bad, but the first one was better in my opinion. Also, if you want a better looking dagger, the Furbolg chest piece comes with a dagger that's scabbard has a leather wrap. I don't know why this one gets a unique dagger as the rest all look the same, but if you choose this one, then you also have to have a weird leather scale armor thing. Trade-offs, I suppose. For our final variant, I have decided to go with the Snow Veil chest. Just kidding. Could you imagine? I don't even think I've seen that many gems and that large of a size together in my life. Let alone some goon decide to wear this in a battle with his tattered rags. This is the equivalent of putting a Supreme sticker on your 1992 Honda Civic. Anyways, the one that I actually choose is the Snowstalker chest. Not because its overtly white themes gives you the tactical advantage of blinding your enemies with your outfit, but rather this is the only one in this variant that has the kilt matching the same colors all the time. All the other ones have the same off-putting gray second kilts. I don't know if this is a glitch or something, but knowing Ubisoft, this could be an intentional design, which means that all of these other outfits are just stuck with a gray kilt. So we're going to be stuck with this one, which is unfortunate because this also happens to be the one that has a properly worn kilt that is also draped across the body like a sash. It is honestly so fitting that an armor piece is like 1 step forward and 2 steps back. Good old For Honor. Also, this has some weird leather scale armor and a bunch of fur. Overall, just weird. Now that we've finished the chest pieces, let me say sorry if the outcome is kind of underwhelming. That being said, I am just a messenger. This is something you should take up with Ubisoft. They're the ones making the outfits. Let me finish up by talking about some of the arm pieces, which is going to be pretty short. They all suck. Like, none of them make sense. They consist of leather braces and pauldrons. I know that we said leather was passable for chest pieces, but pretty much just that. It would probably not be very helpful on your arms. What would be helpful to the arms are long sleeves, for the ridiculous amounts of rain and snow you would probably get in northern Scotland. The closest we get to that is the Among Us arms that have rolled up sleeves. Better than nothing, I guess. That's pretty much it. Sorry, I've been gone a long while. I just get really busy with IRL stuff, and then I was busy studying for a test for like 2.5 weeks straight, and I just ended up failing that test anyways. But now the test is passed, and I'm going to try and make more videos, so we'll see how well that works out. That being said, if you like this video, please hit the like button as well. It really helps me out and gets the video to other people. Also, if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so that you can see my next videos come out. Thank you to my YouTube members for supporting my content. If you'd like to become a member as well, the join button is down below. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or Scottish clan heritage that you'd like to share, please leave it down below. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time. Peace.